whatever, kind of just breaking it down and what kind of experience do you really want to have? And what's the best way to get that?
This is the How to Quit Working Show. Jeff Steinman believes entrepreneurship is the only true path to freedom. That's why he created the How to Quit Working Show, where you'll hear stories, insights, and inspiration from lifestyle fanatics who left their soul-sucking 9-to-5 job forever. Now, here's your host, author, entrepreneur, and ultimate lifestyle fanatic, Jeff Steinman.
Hello and welcome to the How to Quit Working Show. Do you want to travel? Have you ever met anybody who hates traveling? I mean, I'm sure there's a few people out there, but for the most part, everybody I have ever met, it's always a huge goal of theirs to travel. I want to travel. I want to see this. I want to see that. I want to see everything. I want to go all around the globe and see all the amazing sights. Well, we're going to talk to somebody today who has built a life as what she calls a nomad and created this great platform called Nomadtopia. We're going to talk to Amy Scott, who is a world traveler who is helping other people to do the same. And if you have ever had any desire to travel around the world and not have to worry about how you're going to make money, or really just have like time freedom, you know, I've got a niece coming in May, and will be my first nephew or niece. I've never had any nieces or nephews, and I'm really looking forward to it. And my brother and his wife do not live in the area, so it is going to require some traveling. And I was just thinking about this morning. Is like, it's so great that like what I do and how I earn money doesn't have anything to do with where I am physically, right? So I am going to be spending some time in probably a couple different parts of the country, spending time with my new niece. At least we are pretty sure it's going to be a niece. But anyway, I'm very excited about that. And I mean, it's not just about traveling. It's about being able to just have the freedom to do what you want to do. And Amy is going to give us a great interview about how she's done that and some great tips for you if you'd like to do that as well. Now, before we get into that, though, I wanted to make sure that you are aware of these live trainings that I am doing. I am having so much fun doing these trainings, and I'm getting such great feedback. You know, people are just telling me that one of my favorite comments is if you just did one of the things that Jeff talks about on this training, it'd be worth your time. And I'm doing them a couple times a week, and if you want to come and find out how to start a business, and not how to start a business that's just some silly website sitting up there that's never made any sales, because, you know, for every company that makes money, there's like probably 10 that are just websites and there has never been a sale that's been made. But if you want to create a business that really makes money and where making money is like the number one focus, that's what we focus on, then you want to join this webinar. It's really, it's so much fun to do, and folks are getting so much value out of it. And just a couple of the things that we cover is we cover how to identify a great business idea and be certain that it will work. You know, you don't have to play this guessing game. You don't have to play this game of, oh, I think, you know, people might want to buy some T-shirts with unicorns on them. And then this whole idea of, well, let me just go create some T-shirts with unicorns on them and see if anybody wants to buy it. It doesn't have to work that way, because you know what? People may or may not want those T-shirts with the unicorns on them. You have to flip it around and look at it from a different standpoint. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do in this webinar. So go to howtoquitworking.com/webinar and get information about this free webinar. I call it a live training because that's really what it is. Not only do I deliver some really great information on this webinar, but you can also interact. You can ask questions. We've got a chat box, and you might even make some friends on the webinar. So go to howtoquitworking.com/webinar, get registered for the webinar. And now let's talk to Amy Scott of Nomadtopia. Amy, welcome to the How to Quit Working Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You know, you run a website called Nomadtopia, and you are no hypocrite. You certainly walk the walk. You're coming to us from Mexico today.
Yes, I'm in San Miguel de Allende, which is about 3 or 4 hours north of Mexico City.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, I'm guessing that you didn't just go through high school like normal kids and then decide that you were going to become a nomad. I'm guessing there was a little bit of a journey or a transition there, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
Tell us a little bit about that. How did you break away from, what society wants you to do and start doing this cool nomad stuff?
Well, it's definitely been an evolution and a journey over time, and I definitely started out on a very traditional path. I graduated high school, went to college, studied literature, wanted nothing more than to work in publishing, and eventually found myself in San Francisco working in publishing, and that was all great. And then I just had a conversation with some of my cousins one weekend when we rented a house for the weekend and had kind of a family getaway. And a couple of them were saying, like, we're really glad that we had a chance to travel and do all this other stuff before we, quote unquote, settled down. One of them had just gotten married, and they were in their late 30s at the time, and I was in my late 20s. And I thought, they're right. There's definitely more that I want to see of the world, and I want to be doing something different. The 2 weeks vacation just really isn't cutting it. And this may not have been what they meant, but I turned the whole thing into a plan to quit my job and travel for at least 9 months.
Oh, wow. I'm sure that's not what they meant.
It was, I don't know. I mean, it was like within that weekend, like by the time I got home, I had a partner at the time. I got home and I said to him, okay, here's what I think we should do. I think we should quit our jobs. I think we should travel. And I don't know why I took it to such an extreme immediately. It was just like, I had this gut feeling that this was something I needed to do. And, but again, even though the idea happened very quickly, it was about 2.5 years before I actually left. Broke up with my boyfriend in the meantime, and who decided he didn't want to go.
So I was going to ask what his reaction was to that whole let's quit our jobs thing.
At first, he was totally on board. He was the one who pulled out the atlas, okay, where can we go? And, started kind of mapping out an itinerary. He was surprisingly it was, at the time, it seemed like a no-brainer to both of us. He was like, yeah, this sounds amazing. Let's do it. And I was totally obsessed, saving money and reading everything I could get my hands on and discovering oh, this is actually a thing, around the world trip. People do this.
Yeah.
And, kind of discovered this whole kind of culture of people doing that kind of thing. And I think there may have been other reasons for the breakup as well in hindsight, but at the time, again, there were a couple of years to think about it, right, and sure. to question it, and I don't think I had a moment's doubt ever. Maybe the day we broke up for 30 minutes, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, I'm going anyway, obviously.
Obviously. Now that's right. when you've got your mind really, really set on something. I was locked and loaded to ask you. I wanted to ask you, did you have any regrets after you made that decision? But you said no. You had maybe for 30 minutes in a moment of weakness after the breakup, but other than that, no regrets.
No, not at all. And it's funny, too, because I had for many years thought about quitting my job to work for myself. I worked in publishing. I was surrounded by freelancers, freelance editors, proofreaders, indexers, all these people who were working from home. And I thought, well, I could do that. Maybe I should just join them, But that always seemed like such a big, daunting step, and I always I don't know, it's hard and it's unpredictable, but for some reason quitting my job to travel didn't seem nearly so scary.
Well, that's interesting. I think it seems like the difference is because you had motivation, you had this reason, you had this purpose behind doing it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I was so focused on making it happen that it was clear to me I needed money first. So I had a goal of how much money I wanted to have saved before I left, and it was once I reach that number, I'm ready to go.
So talk a little bit about how you did that financial preparation.
Yeah, well, it was not easy. I was living in San Francisco, which is not a cheap city. This was 10 years ago, but I was so I was living with my boyfriend, so our living expenses were a little less than living alone, but It was an expensive city. I had a car, so car payments and all of that. And I was making less than $40,000 a year.
Oh my gosh. Now I'm wondering, how did you eat in San Francisco for 40 grand a year?
Right. So I sold my car fairly quickly.
Okay.
It seemed like, I'm hardly using it. That's just like a really easy way that cut out at least $300 a month right there.
Sure.
We definitely didn't go out a lot. I'd say we probably went out to eat once a week, meet friends for drinks occasionally, do whatever. And then, of course, I had transportation costs, like commute costs and stuff like that. But yeah, it had always been doable. And what really helped a lot in keeping me focused, because, 2+ years is a long time to be working towards something and not getting there.
Yeah,
Feeling like it's so far away, right? But there were so many times I remember I'd think say someone would invite me out for happy hour or something. I'd be like, well, you can go out for drinks now, or I can have another night in Thailand or something like that. Or, lunch out or dinner in India, or whatever. When I thought of what I could get with that same money in another place where I wanted to go and where, the experiences I wanted to have and all of that, that really provided motivation to keep me on track. And of course, I had times I was like, oh, screw it. Let's go out for a nice meal. Let's go on a trip, whatever.
Yeah.
But because it's unsustainable to be scraping pennies constantly. But also when you're really motivated and you really want something, it's not as much of hardship,
Yeah, because you've got a reason for it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Purpose. So you basically came up with a number that you needed to be comfortable to quit your job and travel the world. And then you put together a plan over the 2 years of what you had to do to get to that number. So now, did you have kind of I know my living expenses are this much and I've got this much extra, which means I got to save this much, and then that's how I'll get to where I'll be in 2.5 years?
I think when I started out, I didn't know how long it would take, and I didn't really have mapped out. I don't remember mapping it out that clearly, which is interesting because now I definitely would do it that way.
Oh, okay.
I think maybe I just I haven't had, exposure to some of the influences and ideas and approaches that I know about now. And I think at the time it was just I'm just going to save as much as I can. And I'm not sure how long that's going to take, but I'll just get there as soon as I can. But yeah, more than anything, I was just focused on the number, and it was however long it takes to get there. And also for people who think that this stuff is, this kind of trip is really expensive, I saved $12,000.
Oh,
and that lasted me a year.
Whoa, $12,000 for a year.
Yeah. And I wasn't even I wasn't hitchhiking and, sleeping in a dorm with 20 people sometimes, but, I definitely, took good care of myself on the road, and definitely had times where I, got private rooms with air conditioning and private bathroom and, the whole 9 yards, so to speak.
Sure.
And didn't, flew instead of taking buses. I definitely wasn't scraping by for that whole year. And so it gives you a sense of what's possible.
Yeah, but you were clearly being kind of smart about what you were doing, right? Because, I don't know that I could live for $12,000 in a year here in the Midwest of the U.S.
Well, right. And that's partly why, for example, I didn't go to Europe at all, except I spent 10 days in England, which, I was hemorrhaging money. But yeah, the rest of the time I was in South America and India and in Southeast Asia, which I chose partly because I was interested in those areas, but also because I knew that my money would go a lot further. Absolutely.
Awesome. So you were really smart and really strategic about it. How did you support yourself? Were you doing something to make money while you were traveling?
Not at all. And that's why I was so focused on having the money saved before I left.
I got you. But at some point that $12,000 ran out, 12 months in. What happened then?
Well, luckily I knew it was coming.
You could see the bank account balance going down, down, down.
Right. So I was actually out of the U.S. for about just shy of 9 months. And near the end of that, it was definitely like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? I definitely don't want to go back to an office. I've got to find another way, a way to continue to support myself and keep some of this freedom and adventure. So that was when I was like, well, I already don't have a job. I have all this experience in publishing. It's a total no-brainer to just start freelancing and see how it goes. Like, I really have nothing to lose at this point. Sure. And so when I went back to the US, I bought my first laptop. And so I had enough money left also. I think, I don't remember putting, that whole thing on a credit card. Had enough money left over, bought a laptop, and set myself up in LA at the time. And kind of just, hung out my shingle, telling everyone I knew in publishing that I was now available for editing, and got my first client like the day I said I was officially in business. And that was over 9 years ago.
Wow. That sounds pretty easy.
It was in some ways. Like I said, because I chose something, that I had contacts, I had experience, and, the first person who hired me was my old boss, like he knew my work. He knew that I could do the job and that I was familiar with their books and, that whole thing. So I set myself up to make it easy because I knew I wanted something that would be like the most surefire way to make money as soon as possible.
If you didn't have to make money as soon as possible, would you have done something different?
That's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that.
I love hearing that response.
Yeah.
I love being the first one to ask a question.
Totally. Well, I think, in a way, that's kind of how Nomadtopia came about. Because years later, when, I was still able to support myself with the editing and had kind of the luxury of space and a little money in the bank, to think more like, okay, what do I really want to do with my life, and what do I have to share with the world? And that was how Nomadtopia came about, was thinking about, my experience and my expertise and what I love to talk to people about and how I want to support people. And obviously, after having done this for so many years, I have a lot to share and I have a lot that I can support people with. So, but at the time, to go back to your original question, I actually don't know what I would have done then. Again, it was, in the last 10 years, I've been exposed to so much, online in terms of like, discovering your passion and finding your purpose. And, there's so many people who are offering support and kind of showing the way for that kind of stuff that I wasn't really in that space back then. So I don't know.
You were just a girl that wanted to travel.
Yeah. And I was like, well, crap, how can I make some money so I can keep doing it? So yeah, I don't feel like I had kind of the same support and the same role models really to find like, what's my meaning in life? It's just like, well, I enjoy editing. I know how to do it. Let's rock.
You made such a really good point in that this was 10 years ago. So this was like, 2003, 4, 5, something like that.
Yep.
And nobody was talking about passion and purpose in life. And that's, it never even occurred to me, but you're right. This whole discussing what you're passionate about and what makes you excited and what your real purpose in life is a new conversation. Isn't that kind of amazing?
Yeah. Or if it was there, I feel like it must have been around somewhere, but it definitely wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Yeah, and I think Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, really kind of propelled it more into, it's still not in the mainstream, but I think it's closer to the mainstream because of Simon Sinek's book. So just maybe a thought.
Yeah,
or maybe a bit of a speculation that I would have there.
Yeah, and then I just think of like people like Wayne Dyer and, people like that who I kind of imagine have been doing this longer than that, but I actually don't really know.
Yeah.
He definitely wasn't on my radar. So yeah.
Well, interesting stuff. Well, tell us a little bit about what are you doing now? What does your life look like today?
Well, now along the way in the last 9 years, I picked up a husband.
You picked up a husband. Okay. You find him on your travels?
I did, actually.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah. I had, so after I started working for myself, I was back in the States and really knew from day one, the whole plan was get to a point where I can support myself doing this so I can work from anywhere, and then I'm out of here. And so once I felt I was in a position to do that, I decided to go to Argentina because I had really enjoyed my time there on my round-the-world trip and wanted to keep working on my Spanish, lower cost of living, which is always helpful when you're just getting started. And yeah, that's where I ended up meeting my husband. So I didn't know that was also waiting for me in Argentina. So that was rather great the way that whole thing worked out. So
yeah.
Now we have been, and so shortly after we got married, he quit his job and he's also working for himself online. So we're both able to work from anywhere. And now, so we have a home base in Argentina, and it kind of varies. We've been spending, I'd say, between 4 and 6 months in Argentina, and then we go off for a while and come back. Last year, we were gone for about a year, and then we were just finished 4 months back in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and then we've actually only been in Mexico about a week and a half,
okay.
And or 2 weeks, 2 weeks today actually, and we'll be here for another couple of weeks, and then we're going to the States for a bit. We're doing some house sitting, so we follow the flow and where we want to spend time. I've always wanted to spend more time in Mexico, which is why we're here now, and beyond like the second week of January, we have no plans right now, so we're often kind of just winging it.
That's cool. Do you like it that way?
Yes.
Okay.
For the most part. I mean, there's one thing that I think is really important to mention, and that I've definitely discovered along the way, is that there's times when like you can't give work all of your focus and travel all of your focus at the same time. It's pretty much impossible.
Right, because you only have 100% of your focus.
Right, exactly. So it's definitely something that ebbs and flows. There are times when I and we are more focused on, enjoying where we are or moving around a lot more, and times where we really just hunker down and stay put and, are working every day like we would anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the one part about winging it that can be challenging sometimes, because, well, especially now, and with your podcast, I just started a podcast too. And so like having, the right infrastructure to be able to schedule interviews in advance, and like, I don't know where I'm going to be. And, I'm already finding that challenging.
Yeah.
So, and then I also have one-on-one coaching clients that I work with in addition to my editing work. So it's definitely important to have a sense of like, where am I going to be? What's my availability going to be like? What's the internet going to be like? Sure. And the more I move around, the harder that is. So it's definitely something that I have to have in mind and, plan accordingly.
Sure. Well, and I understand the internet is different in different parts of the world, different levels of quality and reliability, right?
Yeah. Well, also, it can vary so much even in the same place. It can vary even just depending on like where you are in relation to the router.
Sure.
Like we were staying with a friend the first couple of days here, and she's got great internet, except that her guest room is 2 levels below where her router is. And here in Mexico, like all the buildings are concrete, and okay. Like the signal just barely reached us, no matter what, And so things like that, it's like, well, unless she's okay with me going to like sit in her bedroom and do my podcast, I don't think this is going to work out,
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be really hard to predict until we actually get somewhere what the situation is going to be like. And actually the place we are in now, when we came to look at this apartment, we brought our computer with us, to
cool.
test it out and like, okay, is this going to be doable? So, and so far so good, amazingly. I'm looking at my phone. I've got 1 bar of Wi-Fi right now, which is crazy, but luckily we seem to be doing all right.
Yeah. Well, let's not jinx it.
I know.
So Where do you typically stay when you're staying somewhere? Do you sublease or hotels or with friends or what?
Yeah, it depends how long we're staying somewhere. Definitely, for what we usually do, like we'll plan something in advance for like the first couple. So here, I'll just use Mexico as an example since we just got here. We knew we wanted to stay in San Miguel for about a month, but we definitely like to have a place to land. You know, we like to know where we're going when we get somewhere, especially if it's a crazy hour of the day or whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, especially because of the internet and because we like to get to know the neighborhoods and whatever, we don't necessarily want to book for a whole month or more. You know, sometimes it's more than that, sight unseen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so what we usually try to do is either sometimes we have a friend in the area, or we even sometimes do couch surfing, or just book a hotel or whatever for the first, or Airbnb for maybe 3 to 5 days. And then that gives us time to kind of get the lay of the land, see what else is available. Also, you can often get better deals if you're local, you know, talking to people on the street instead of, you know, doing it all online. So that's a lot of the time, that's been the way we've done it. We were in Bali for 2 months last year and did the same. Like, we had a place booked when we first got there, and then we just like walked around, talked to people, looked for signs, and that's how we figured out where we wanted to stay for the majority of the time.
Excellent. Very cool stuff. Tell us a little bit about Nomadtopia. What is that all about, and who might be interested in that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the focus of it is, you know, helping people use location independence as a way to have the freedom that they want in life. And, you know, for most of the people who are attracted to Nomadtopia, that means some form of, you know, working from anywhere, or, you know, moving abroad, or maybe just, you know, going somewhere warm for the winters. You know, it can take different forms for different people. Some people are like traveling nonstop, and other people are like, well, I just want to like go where my spouse needs to go for work, you know, without having to uproot everything. So, you know, location independence which is really just being able to work and support yourself no matter where you are, that can open up so many opportunities. And it doesn't have to be about, you know, being a nomad forever. It doesn't mean, you know, sell everything. It can, but it doesn't have to. And I think that's really a big part of my message is, you know, to find the way that works for you and to find a lifestyle that works for you and is creating the right, you know, creating the experience that you want to have. And if traveling nonstop sounds like a nightmare, well, then don't do it, you know. But if you're feeling like you've really got to shake things up and you're not happy with your life the way it is, then figure out what's going to, you know, what's going to work for you. And most importantly, make it happen. That's a big part of why I started it, because I feel like I have, you know, in all these years of travel, I've met so many people who say like, oh, wow, that sounds great. I wish I could do that. Or, you know, maybe I'll do that someday. Or, and they're full of excuses or full of like some days. And that stuff drives me crazy. Like, if you really want it, and I understand if you don't, that's fine. But if you really want this, whatever it is, do something to make it happen. And so I'm helping people with, you know, resources and information and support and inspiration. So, like, there are no excuses left, basically.
You know, it's funny, as I was coming into my office this morning, it's mid-November here in it's mid-November everywhere. But yeah. I was opening up the door, and it was one of those days where there was a gust of really cold wind as I opened the door, and it made it really hard to open the door. And I was like, oh, this is winter. Winter is upon us. I think what I want to do is I want to maybe be a snowbird someday.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody, Amy, who is ready to get going on this, and they're just kind of sitting back thinking, what's the first thing I should do? I'm not sure how to get started.
Well, I already alluded to this a little bit, but I think one of the most important things to do early on is to figure out what you really want and what this really looks like for you. You know, it's funny because, you know, I've been doing this a long time, but it's getting kind of trendy, this whole like work on the beach on your laptop and, you know, but like, honestly, I hate working on the beach. Like, it's seriously like sand in your laptop. And
yeah, that sounds horrible.
It's too bright. And like, and then, you know, all the local fishermen know you have an expensive computer. Like, the whole thing I think is a bad idea. Depends where you are, but yeah.
Sure.
You know, so, you know, I think it's important to kind of dissect the dream, you know, and the stereotypes and like, okay, seriously, you know, do you like to move around a lot? Do you like the beach? Do you like hot weather? You know, whatever, kind of just breaking it down, and what kind of experience do you really want to have? And what's the best way to get that? And incidentally, I have an ebook which helps people do exactly this.
Beautiful. How do we get that?
Yeah, it's called Destination Nomadtopia, and right now it's actually just available on Amazon on Kindle. And it walks you through a series of questions to really map out what would be the ideal lifestyle for you.
Excellent. Well, we'll link that up below. Amy, how do you define success?
That's a great question. And I think my answer shifts over time, which is why I'm kind of stopping to think, what's my definition today?
It's supposed to shift over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would define it as having the freedom to live like the best version of my life. The freedom to live the life that calls to me.
The freedom to live the life that calls to you. Amy, what's the last piece of advice you want to leave our listeners with? Just do it.
It sounds like such a cliche, and Nike stole the thunder, but, you know, I think life's too short, and there's always excuses. It's never the right time. It's complicated. It's hard, but it's so worth it. If you really want something, you know, don't let logistics and fear and excuses bog you down and stop you from doing something that could really just blow everything wide open. And I think that I lost my train of thought. I had a really profound thing I was going to say.
It happens. Thank goodness for editing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or not.
Or not. Whatever. You can keep it. I don't care. Let me think if there was another piece of that I was going to add. Just that, you know, like, none of this is irreversible. The kind of stuff that we're talking about and the kind of stuff that, you know, Jeff, you're always talking to people about on the podcast is just give it a shot. Like, what's the worst that can happen, you know? And it's way better, in my opinion, to try something and discover that it's not what you wanted or it's not working out, rather than spend God knows how long wondering and thinking, what if?
Great advice. Amy, where can we go to get more information about you at Nomadtopia?
Nomadtopia.com would be the best place to start. And then also, if anyone's curious about my editing work, that's at nomadeditorial.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll link that all up below the show, as well as your book. What's the name of your book again?
Destination Nomadtopia.
Destination Nomadtopia on Amazon. It's all linked up below. Amy, thanks so much for coming on the show and just generously sharing your experiences and helping our listeners to figure out what they want out of life and put some of this great stuff in practice.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
It's all about freedom. It's all about having the freedom to do what you want when you want and not be tied down by a job. Nobody deserves that. And if you really are ready to create some freedom in your life and you're ready to have somebody who's done it before, somebody who has created a life for herself that puts her family first and still is able to be very successful as an entrepreneur, go over to howtoquitworking.com/coaching and reach out to Heather Osgood, our How to Quit Working coach, for more information about how to quit working coaching and how we can help you quit your job, live an amazing life of freedom like Amy, like Heather, like me, like all of our guests on the How to Quit Working show. Go to howtoquitworking.com/coaching, and I will talk to you next time on the How to Quit Working show.
Thanks for joining us on the How to Quit Working show. Tune in next time when we'll talk to another amazing person just like you who is now living the ultimate life of freedom and doing it on their terms. If you want to learn how to quit working and get these episodes delivered directly to you, visit howtoquitworkingshow.com.